Welcome to the Quark and Roll podcast. I'm your host, Kwok Hui Lan. Today's guest is the Reverend Stephanie Spellers, an Episcopal priest, author, and church leader, both at the parish and denominational levels. In this episode, we are going to talk about her new book, Church Tomorrow. And we are going to discuss the future of the church and the spiritual quest of the nuns and the nuns. Welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you so very, very much, Huilan. It's a pleasure to be here.
In the book, you talk about you were once a nun, that is, someone who did not belong to any religious community.
It's true.
And your heart has a special place for them. Can you share about your faith journey?
I would love to. It's strange because, of course, I'm sitting here with you right now through Episcopal Divinity School. You were one of my professors there. And before that, I went through Harvard Divinity School. And before that, I majored in religion in college. But so much of that journey, certainly in college and even my first graduate degree in religion, all of that I did as a non-Christian. I grew up in a small city, small town in Kentucky, Frankfort. My whole family was culturally Christian, and I'd say they've certainly become more engaged over the years. But when I was growing up, I didn't feel a great pressure to become Christian. Everybody else was Christian, don't get me wrong. And I even had a date on which I was supposed to be baptized. And the day before my baptism, I was 9 years old, and they had taken us all to this big amusement park. I laugh and say it was the treat before they locked us down as Christians. No more fun after that. But anyway, they had taken us on this trip, and we were at a rest area, and I was racing another kid down a hill, and I fell, broke my arm. So while everybody else got to go on to the amusement park, and then the next day they all got baptized, I got picked up by my mom, went to the hospital, got a cast, and the next day watched everybody else get baptized while I sat in the pews with my sinful arm and a cast. I am honestly so grateful for that because I think it opened up a different path for me. I loved studying world religions. I loved studying spirituality. I loved studying and thinking about the impact of religion on people's lives. But being religious myself, I didn't want any part of it. I didn't want to be a Christian. I certainly didn't want to be a church person. I thought that church equaled hypocrisy, church equaled exclusion, church equaled just being mean and a know-it-all. And from a young age, I remembered thinking, if that's God, you can keep him. And so I explored, I wandered, I went in and out of different traditions outside of Christianity and then back in again. And slowly, God opened doors and opened my heart so that I ended up becoming Christian. I was baptized at age 26 and a half. So that's why I say that I've spent half of my life, I'm 53 now. I actually just turned 54 a few days ago. So I've just barely tipped to now be spending more of my life as a Christian than as a nun. But until a week ago, it was half and half.
So first of all, belated happy birthday to you.
Thank you.
Now, in this book, you started by telling us why the church memberships along all mainline denominations has been in decline in the past decades. Why is that so?
There's so many reasons. Whenever anybody tries to tell you that it's simple, it's just not true. There are a lot of reasons. And honestly, a lot of the reasons are beyond church. I found it really helpful to look at the decline, not only of traditional religion, but honestly, the decline of institutional affiliation in America. A lot of people are going to be really familiar with Robert Putnam and his book, Bowling Alone, which traced the real cultural shift, the reckoning that America went through after the 1960s, where, especially with the advent of television, technology, cars, people got more and more atomized. We got more and more kind of isolated and less interested in connecting with the communities around us, less and less interested in building what Putnam called social capital. So we know the Elks low on membership. We know that Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts lower on membership. We know that there are so many institutions in American life that used to be at the center, the heart of everything, who are now really struggling. The church is just one of those. So I found it really helpful to trace what are the forces that have led to this declining spirit of affiliation, spirit of what Charles Taylor calls association or mobilization. You know, we used to be a culture of people who mobilized and moved together toward a future. Now we're in an age of authenticity. What we're moving toward is greater self-discovery, self-knowledge, self-actualization. And a culture like that doesn't really go looking for how to be a member of something. They're not looking for a way to commit to a particular identity marker. People are less and less inclined toward that kind of commitment. So churches suffer in that culture, but every other institution does too. The question, I think, before us, there are a few questions. One of them is, so what does spirituality and spiritual life look like when institutional affiliation is no longer culturally a fit? And what is church? Is there going to be church tomorrow if we are less and less inclined to move into those kinds of relationships, especially embodied physical relationship with each other? So I had to go out and ask the people who live in that culture, who live in that more kind of privatized, pluralistic, secular environment. And those are the millennials and the Gen Zs.
I have heard that the Black church used to be the bedrock of the Black community. And even some of the churches, they experience church membership decline too.
Yes. Oh, this is not just a trend for the white church. A lot of us think that might be the case. And we figure that, oh, but Latinos and Black folk, we are still so rooted in our home cultures and so rooted in the role of the church in those cultures. That's not the case anymore, Pwilan. In fact, Black people, the Black community in America, we've experienced just as much of a shift toward the nuns, if you will. Nuns are a growing population among Black folk. Nuns are a growing population among Latinos. So, and nuns are certainly a large proportion of Asians in America. So yeah, this is an equal opportunity culture shift we're talking about here. I interviewed a number of people from those various cultural backgrounds and racial backgrounds in order to find out, well, what's the disconnect, especially for Black folk, for Latinos, for Asian folk, and for Native peoples as well. It's really fascinating to see how this movement is cross-cultural.
And what did you hear from the nuns, and especially the nuns who have been members of church or faith communities?
First of all, I need to tell you, they were so happy to talk. I wondered, honestly, what happens when a priest walks into a bar, kind of thing. But in my case, I was approaching people. Most of them were strangers to me. There were a few that I knew. For instance, I interviewed a couple of folk who grew up in the church where I now serve in New York, St. Bart's in New York City. So I interviewed a couple of people who had grown up in the youth program and then for various reasons had said, I'm just not a believer in all of this. And so, for instance, they loved the community, but they couldn't continue to participate as if they believed in Christianity. I spoke with folk who, again, most of whom were strangers. Some of them grew up a part of a Christian community. For instance, a number of evangelicals, former Roman Catholics, former Lutherans, folks who'd grown up Methodist, Baptist, you name it. I also spoke to a number of people who grew up with truly kind of tabula rasa. They grew up either atheist or agnostic or just ambivalent about religion. And so their pathways were so diverse, even though we have these terms, nun, the nuns being people who maybe never had anything, or certainly who don't have an affiliation now, and the duns being people who said, I used to have it, I'm done with it. Those terms make it sound, these are groups of people who share a lot in common. In fact, they're on myriad paths. Yet, I did hear themes. I definitely heard commonalities, threads. So I tried to pull those out in this book to say, what are the reasons why so many people are saying no to church, to traditional religion in general? And where are they finding God? Where are they building community? Are they building community at all, for that matter? And what would they tell churches if we were listening? Those were actually, just so you know, those are the 4 questions that I went around with. I used to be a journalist before I was a priest. So I tried to keep it really simple. I was like, here are 4
Yes.
questions. I'm going to sit with people, most of whom I don't know, as individuals. I'm sitting with them 45 minutes to an hour, asking them, tell me about your journey. How and where do you encounter the sacred? How and where do you experience community and belonging? And what would you tell the church if we were listening? And they blew my mind. They just did, over and over and over again. So honest, so brave, so lonely, a lot of them, so hungry, so enterprising, so willing to create something for themselves, so willing to pull, oh my goodness, so much. I have this exposure to Buddhism and this exposure to Islam, and I really like these elements, and I put them together with the things that I still like about Christianity. And I talk about the universe, and I have crystals and tarot cards, and that's so many ways people are just kind of cobbling together. Think of them as religious hybrids. So yeah, they taught me a lot. They taught me a lot about how the spirit moves and the variety of ways people connect with the sacred.
Indeed. Can you share a little bit more about the nuns? Did they sometimes feel a sense of regret of their leaving, or they were still missing something?
I was surprised by how much brokenheartedness I found out there. On the one hand, I knew it's like, oh, people are finding ways of connecting with the sacred, with the spirit. They're building communities. But a lot of people miss what they experienced in Christian community, in church. They were sad that for whatever reasons, church could not be a home for them. For some people, it was because of gender or sexual orientation. They were identifying in a way that their churches could no longer support. So they were just kicked out of families and churches. Some people had too many questions and maybe were told, you got to take that somewhere else. We can't abide by all these questions. A number of people reached a point where they just said, I don't believe this anymore. But the journey out was still painful because, and I heard this from, including even from an atheist who said, I still kind of wish that there had been a way for me to be a part of that community, even if I didn't believe. But ultimately she was like, but I understand. If you're going to be in a church, you got to be Christian. Yeah, there was regret. There was longing, deep, oh, such deep longing. There were also people, though, who said that being a part of Christian community, of a church, they had been told that it should feel connected, that they should feel a relationship with God and with others, and that they didn't. And so for those folk, it was freeing, honestly, to be able to say, well, then how about I stop pretending that I'm finding spirit here? I'm not. Pretend that I'm finding companions on a journey. I'm not. So there were some of those too. There were some
Yeah.
people who were angry, definitely folk who were hurt and angry. But again, not as many as I probably would have expected.
When I was reading the book, I was thinking wow, you are just on point when you said, we talk about the millennial and the Gen Z generation being the me generation. They only care about me. But you talk about there is this deep sense of search for community and belonging.
Desperately so. These are the millennial and Gen Z generations are on record as being the loneliest generations, at least in America, the loneliest generations alive. So just sit with that for a second. That when they are polled and they're asked questions, does anyone care about you? Or do you feel that you are truly known by anyone? Much smaller percentages of these generations say, yes, I feel known. Yes, I feel connected. They are lonely. It's not a coincidence that these are also the most technology saturated generations. I was honestly surprised by the level of reflection in their midst about the difference between social media informed relationships and embodied relationships, or relationships that are kind of based on the internet versus in-person relationships. I heard a number of people use the phrase parasocial, for instance. And these are folk, they weren't students of this topic or anything, but they knew, oh yeah, that's where I have my parasocial relationships. So they're actually pretty suspicious of the claim by social media that these relationships are just as full as anything else. I heard folks saying, we're looking for more. We're not necessarily having a great time finding more, but we're looking for more. I heard them saying that during pandemic, a lot of life went online, but that after that, they were searching. And the culture kept pushing them back to the internet. And don't get me wrong, they are glued to phones. They are. The number of hours that millennials and Gen Z spend on, in some way connected to the internet, it is substantial. But they know that's not where they want to spend their whole lives. So it's a struggle. It's definitely a struggle. And I think that what was clear to me was that if people were experiencing, if they had an invitation into authentic community, embodied community, community where folk can be real and vulnerable and broken and not pretending they've got all the answers, and loved, if they could be in communities where they really feel love, that still trumps whatever you can find on your phone.
If the churches were to listen to their invitations, what would some of those invitations be?
As I listened with these nuns and duns, and especially to their answers to my fourth question, what would you tell the churches if we were listening? Ultimately, I try to distill their wisdom, their challenge to us, their prophecies, if you will, into 4 messages, 4 prophecies. So can I share these 4 with you?
Please.
All right. They are chapters in the book. So I really tried to spend some time with what they said, what they were telling us. And I'm actually opening this right now. Okay. One of the things that they said, one of the challenges they put before us was, will the real Christians please stand up? They experience in the culture around them, they see a lot of Christianity and it's nothing they want to be a part of. It's damaging. In fact, what my phrase for it is, they see white Christo nationalism. They don't see Christianity. And they're wondering, if you Christians are here, would you please say so? Stop being so quiet. Stop being so passive. Stop worrying that you're going to scare people off by saying you're Christian. What they've said to me is, right now, we've left the scene and we've allowed Christianity to be hijacked. So they're asking us, if you're Christian, you need to say so. You need to go public. That is the first prophecy. The second of their prophecies, they said, please stop making idols of your buildings, your structures, your rules, your dogmas. They see us protecting, maintaining our institutions. And they're wondering, do you care about anything but that? They see, honestly, that we've made idols of our own creations, and they're calling us on it. So they're calling us, I believe, into ways of innovation, freedom, creativity, and understanding that the Spirit is out there moving beyond our structures, and we need to go catch up with her. They said to me, and this came up so often, so very often, they kept saying, we meet God outside. We meet God in nature. So many people's stories were about connecting with the Spirit outside. And so I think a prophecy from them was, why don't you, church, why don't you go meet God outside? And let's be honest, so many of the people we know, so many of our own experiences of the Spirit involve nature. And yet churches don't do much to engage that part of our common spiritual experience. And there are a lot of reasons why. I happen to think churches are probably scared of what we can't control, right? And so we downplay the fact that people are having lively experiences of the holy out there. The nuns and the duns are inviting us to just admit God is moving outside, literally outside our walls, and in nature. God is speaking. God has always been speaking out there. Go meet God. And if we go meet God out there, we're also going to meet a lot of nuns and duns. And the fourth prophecy from them is an invitation to us to please form loving, embodied communities that will welcome our whole authentic selves. They want to be, as I said earlier, they want to be real. They want to dance. They want to move. And they also want to know that there is a freedom to connect with the Spirit. I really heard here an invitation to move into, do you remember Phyllis Tickle?
Yes.
Oh, what a prophet she was, right? The great Phyllis Tickle, who spoke about the great emergence and the idea of emerging church. And one of the things she was saying, my goodness, must have been a couple of decades ago, she was telling us that we were moving into an age of the Spirit. I believe these nuns and duns are dwelling in that space right now. And again, they're inviting us to come out and form authentic communities that are not afraid of the Spirit. Form communities where we can worship with our whole selves. We can share stories. We can be transformed. We're not trying to get into a box and stay there. That's not the goal of Christianity. That's not the goal of spirituality, of religion. It has been the goal of church to get everybody into our boxes. They are inviting us instead to move into authentic community. And again, if we do, I think a lot of folk would be excited to join us in that, and maybe even to teach us how to do it, how to be authentic, how to move beyond ourselves and into deeper relationship with God and one another.
Thank you very much for these 4 beautiful prophecies.
Right?
Now, what are your hopes for 2026?
My hopes. I hope, first of all, I hope we'll listen. I hope we will listen to their prophecies. And a part of this book is sort of me wrestling with and reckoning with the prophetic voices of these nuns and duns and saying, okay, if they're inviting us to stop idolizing our structures, our buildings, then we need to affirm that, yes, we know how to innovate. So I hope that going forward, we can take this invitation and become more innovative. I hope that we can take their invitation to stand up as progressive Christians, as inclusive Christians, as Christians who see God in the world around us, and be a Jesus movement. So I pray that we can take this invitation to become more and more the Jesus movement. I pray that we will, again, move outside and join God in nature and affirm all the ways that God has already come alive out there, and we've been afraid to affirm. Go ahead and affirm it. Go ahead and explore ways of being church outside of our walls. And again, in response to their prophecy, I hope that we will learn to dance with the Spirit, learn to form communities, especially worship communities, where we are embodied. We are not afraid of the diverse cultures around us, the diverse expressions around us. There, again, God is so much bigger than anything one church could ever describe or prescribe. The nuns and nuns remind us of that. My final hope for anybody reading this book, for anybody who is praying about the future of faith, I hope that you'll not just engage what I've written. Don't just listen for what the nuns and nuns I met said. Go talk to nuns and nuns in your own life. Go sit with them. Tell them, I just read this book where this lady went around asking non-religious people 4 questions. You're my friend. You're not religious. I think I could probably learn from you. Could we sit down together over coffee and I could ask you these 4 questions? As people open your own ears, your own heart to the wisdom, the prophecy of nuns and nuns around you. And don't be surprised if it opens pathways toward partnership that you could not have imagined. Don't be surprised if some of them say to you, I didn't think Christians were interested in listening. I always thought Christians just wanted to tell everybody what to do. If you guys are listening now, maybe we could do something together. I believe that they know something. I believe that God is not finished with this world or with this church. And that if there will be a church tomorrow, and there will, but that church needs to be a church that listens to God and to our neighbors and to the Spirit, and then goes out and dances.
Thank you so much for joining the podcast. I highly recommend this book, Church Tomorrow by Reverend Stephanie Spellers. If you find the podcast of value to you, please click like, comment, and subscribe. I will see you in the next episode.